And so, the precious alchemy of life, that as we come to recognize the precious alchemy that life is, we realize that there is nothing that happens in the play of life that is not part of the great unfolding, that there is no division, there is no separation, that it is one glorious flow of grace, one glorious intelligence. And the alchemy takes place as we realize that our system, our human experience, the lived life, is the precious alchemy. That in a way we are distilling all of life out of the perception that there is division and into a clear vision, a clear seeing of the unbounded reality. That our lived human experience is this incredible, precious alchemy that allows us to move from misperception to refined perception, clear seeing, subtle perception. And as the nervous system refines, we have more and more natural ability to drink in the nectar, the nectarine bliss. As we drink in the nectarine bliss, we are nourishing the deepest flows of intelligence that we are made of, that all of life is made of. And we are shifting our lived experience from an experience that feels like division. We're shifting from an experience that feels like someone that is a victim to life, to the recognition that we are one with life, to the recognition that we are all of life, to the recognition that we are the glorious divine, undivided one that dances as life and yet is never moved or divided in any way, that we are the light, pure and simple. And so it is through the lived experience that refinement happens. So we're not looking for an experience that takes us away from life, that takes us out of any situation. We are opening and deepening our refined perception to be able to recognize God in everything. This is the freedom, is that we recognize God in everything. And we are recognizing at the level of intelligence, true intelligence of consciousness, what could never be realized or recognized in the mind, because the mind itself is a denser frequency of consciousness. So we are refining to have the perception, and as we digest life and we process life through our system, not process it through the mind, but we process it through our system. The precious alchemy is that we bring the light to everything that feels to be discordant, and we illuminate. And the alchemy is where we shift something that feels to be negative and discordant to the recognition that its true substance, its true essence nature is light. And as this shifting happens, it's happening within our own consciousness, that we are illuminating from within the true nature of what we are made of, the essence nature that we are. And the more that we come to recognize this and we come alive, we could say, the more that our system comes alive as this, in this knowing, we have an increased capacity to subtly perceive the same essence, nature, the same light in everything. That the heart's knowing is a flow. It's a flow. We could say it's a flow of surrender. It is. It's a flow of devotion. It is. It's a flow of blissful joy. It is. The words don't really matter. It's the frequency of the words. And in the receiving, what is even happening is what could be called a transmission, is that the field is just becoming enlivened with the frequency that is fine, that is the light. And there's an attuning to the frequency. And in the attunement, a coming alive, like the particles of joy, intelligent joy that you are made of, start to come alive. So as any of us speak this truth, as we resonate as this truth, we are like an antenna that is transmitting a frequency. And the frequency that we are transmitting gets finer and finer. When we gather together, the frequency that we're transmitting joins together, and its fineness is like a reverberating field. And where there are similar communities tucked away in little pockets of life all over the play of the world, the reverberations are joining as if we are all singing the same mantra. We're singing the same mantra, and it makes the mantra continuous, and it makes the mantra start to become more reverberant and more refined, and the frequency of the mantra that is reaching the surface of life gets more and more subtle, and more light is coming to the surface of life, so that the light can illuminate the surface of life, can actually illuminate the play of the world, can illuminate that the whole play of the world and the collective realm of humanity that feels mostly still to be in separation is illuminating on behalf of the whole, illuminating that there is no separation. And so everything is always happening on a micro and macro scale, we could say, simultaneously. And then we come to recognize that the micro could be that I'm a person, or the micro can be that I'm a point in the infinite field, and the macro can be the world, or the macro can be the divine reality, right? So it's always, everything is always happening on a micro and macro scale, and it just depends upon the frequency that we're living at in this moment, here now, how we perceive it. And so then the glory is that the deeper that we enter into the nourishment of these joyful flows of bliss light in our system, in our consciousness, we're getting nourished by the nectarine bliss flows. And that nourishment is also the alchemy. So the alchemy it's the alchemy that shifts what seems like stress and discordance and separation and negative scripts to the frequency of the essence nature of the bliss. And the alchemy is also that as we drink in the bliss that happens in this transmutation, as we drink in the bliss, we're nourishing the finer and finer flows of intelligence that we're made of. And these flows of intelligence are flows of that are, let's see, the intelligence that create the appearance of life. So what starts to happen, the more that we're living in this flow, recognizing the flow of grace, and in that flow of grace, recognizing the capacity to transmute everything into bliss. And as we drink in that bliss nourishes the finest, subtlest fields of intelligence that have the power to create the appearance of life. So you see where we're going. As we get nourished, as we nourish the fine flows of intelligence that have the power to create the appearance of life, we start creating an appearance of life that is reality, that is finer, more subtle. So we start to feel life becoming smoother, more joyful. We start to feel the support of nature in the life. We start to realize how we are the creator. We are the creator because as we receive the grace, instead of resisting the grace, as we receive the grace, we realize that our system is an intelligent process that can transmute what feels like discordance to its finest substance, which in a way feeds the divine. It feeds the divine intelligence. And as the divine intelligence is fed, it feeds back to us. It ripples back to us. It gives us back these reverberations, and the reverberations then create the appearance of life, right? How glorious, how glorious, right? So we realize that far from being a divided person that is a victim to life, that we have the powerful capacity within our system, our nervous system, or the consciousness that we are. As we come to recognize what we are, we start to reverberate more clearly as the intelligence and subtly can perceive and refine and transmute. And we don't resist anything. We don't enter into the surface of life resistances and judgments and opinions and all the different ways of protecting and projecting. We don't enter into it as rapidly, and because we have this deeper capacity to hold it all in the infinity of our true timeless being. We have this incredible capacity to know the power of what we are as an intelligent process. And instead of moving to reaction and resistance and protection, we're accessing our multidimensional capacity to recognize that we are all of life. And we're in this incredibly refined process of coming to see the light in everything, to see God in everything, to know that God is the means by which we come to know God. God has given us the means, the divine has given us the means to know the divine. And the means is, we could say, to be in the atmosphere of God, to be in the atmosphere of the divine, to reverberate, to resonate at the frequency of the divine. So we've been given this ability to come to presence, to recognize. I mean, it's more subtle than even the ability to come to presence. We are presence. But we can be in dances of life where we think that we are not, but we always are. So we always have the capacity, every being has the capacity to stop. And underneath the moving, changing play of life that we have been habituated to give our attention to, underneath the moving, changing, habitual play of life, right? We're habituated to focus upon the mind and the moving and the changing and the stories and the separation and the protections. But underneath this is always a presence of being that is still and silent. And that through the practices that we have been given by grace of meditation and sitting and the ways that we have come to a certain kind of mindfulness and depthfulness, to enter our own presence, to enter the deeper field of reality, to open to being the witness of the story and not identified with the story, that we're dropping deeper into the finer realms of our own consciousness, our own nervous system, and our own capacity to recognize reality. That we've never lost the capacity to recognize reality, but we can be dancing in ways that we think we have forgotten. But the call of the heart, the longing of the heart, all of the abilities that we have to sense that there's something more, the abilities that we have that seem like we have sixth sense, let's say. Let's bulk it all together. All those kind of abilities that seem to be more than, that have like intuition or psychic ability. You know, we can just group it all together and realize that we have this kind of extra sensory perception, and that is an attunement with our remembering. What can happen within the play of the worldly is that we can try to come to ways of developing our ESP, right? Try to developing ways of our psychic and intuitive abilities. And we can sometimes get a little lost in the astral realms, thinking that we're trying to kind of, fortune tell and pick up the frequencies of beings that have left their bodies and communicate, and that we're trying to develop these subtle perceptions, that we feel like we have these skills and abilities, and we can have a feeling that we want to develop them, because what we really want is to know our divinity, right? Everything is because we want to know our divinity. And so we don't need to be able to communicate with the dead. Although of course it can seem like quite fun and joyous when we explore those realms of those astral realms. But ultimately what we're really longing for is to know our divinity. And what we're really longing for is to open to, in a way, our true sixth sense is awareness. As we open to awareness and not trying to increase our experience as a human but we actually are wanting to really open to recognize that what we are is the awareness. We open to the field of awareness. And when we open to the field of awareness, we're opening to the field of intelligence. We're opening to the field of pure consciousness. And boom, here's the gold, right? Boom, here is the gold. Here's what we've been trying to access, but kind of, you know, reading tea leaves and all this kind of thing, having fun along the way. But what we're really wanting to access is this wide open field of intelligence, which is the pure knowledge, the whole knowledge. Great glory, here we are swimming in the Vade, in the living Vade, which is the entire knowledge. and all we actually have to know is that felt sense of this is myself, this is what I am. When you know that felt sense, this is what I am this presence, I am this being, I am this silence, I am this here now, I am this timeless presence. We're opening to this field of intelligence, which is the total knowledge. It's pure knowledge, and it's also the complete knowledge. So great glory, here it is. And the more that we attune within our vehicle to our intuitive knowing, and again, to deepen our intuitive knowing, what is necessary is that we keep attuning to our heart's knowing of the presence of being, that we're attuning to we're attuning to our intuitive knowing that says this is true, this is true. We're trusting our deep intuitive sense of knowing. We're not looking for permission from the mind. We're not giving that deep intuitive knowing back to a denser frequency and asking for permission. We're attuning to a depth of intuitive knowing that knows, boom, no question, no doubt. This is it, this, right? And we know this, we know the sense of the heart's knowing. So we have, in our learned, protective and conditioned ways, we've learned to not trust and go first to our intuitive knowing. We've learned to go to the mind and to our protective strategies before going to the heart's intuitive knowing. We've learned to move in strategies that will have us feel seen and heard and keep things moving according to our deepest needs met structure that was created in our young life. And our needs met structure is like our survival mechanism. And that's why in the life, when we come to the points of having to face being counterintuitive to our survival mechanism. So being counterintuitive to our survival mechanism is actually to drop into true intuition. But our survival mechanism can be saying, don't go there, don't go there, don't go there, stay safe, make the moves that you need to stay safe, right? So this deep needs met structure is telling us how to stay separate, how to stay within protection, how to stay within the smallness of the mind-body realm of, let's say, human experience that believes in limitation, that's entangled with the collective consciousness. And yet our heart is longing. It's longing. You know, the reason that we feel attuned with anything spiritual on any level is because we're longing to open to the deeper realms. So it doesn't matter if along the way we've, you know, been involved in any kinds of spiritual practices and techniques and who knows, reading tea leaves, tarot, shamanism. It doesn't matter what we've been involved in. It doesn't matter what path has carried us, right? But what we realize is that what we've always been longing for is to know our own divinity. And that generally we will have gathered some sense of deepening, but we will always, within the worldly and astral realms, still feel discontented and disappointed within the depths of our being. We'll still feel lonely. We'll still feel like there's something missing. And we don't really arrive in the glory of our true nature until we know the true nature, until we are resonating at this frequency of the wide open field, where we are resonating in pure consciousness, and we're open to the field, the heart field, the flowing field of our intuitive knowing, which is this knowing of what I am, just that I am. And that once we open to this field of consciousness, all refinement is happening within the field of consciousness. It's not happening like a learning in the mind. It's all happening in the field of consciousness. And so it's in this field of consciousness that the refinement is happening. And this field of consciousness is where this alchemy is happening that we're speaking of, the precious alchemy. It's not in the psychological realm. It's happening within our nervous system, within our consciousness. The glorious alchemy is happening where we are digesting life, and we're digesting life so fully that we don't create toxins. We're not putting out ama into our ama, as in the toxic substances into our life, which play as protections and manipulative behaviors and resistances and stresses. We're digesting life so fully that because we know it's all grace, we know it's all the glory somehow, and we're digesting it through our nervous system. And then the byproduct of digesting it through feeling the feelings and transmuting the sensations and aliveness is that we distill what the mind thinks is stress. We distill through our system into realizing that it's actually bliss, that it's light, that it's essence, it's beingness. And it doesn't matter what words we use, we distill it through our system, and we come to recognize that it's one, it's the same one substance. We can call it love as well. Love is a nice, easy way to describe it. We're in the frequency of love instead of the frequency of fear. So the distillery of the nervous system, of our consciousness, distills fear into love, into bliss, into light. And the more open we are to the presence of being, and the more refined our system is, the more capacity we have, then the process is smoother and more joyful. And, you know, in the earlier stages, what happens is more of a sense of purification. And purification looks a little bit more like we're opening, and life seems to be getting harder. Life seems to be more stressful. But what's happening is the intelligence is actually releasing the blocks and our protections, and it's pushing us to edges so that we get to the edges that we need to get to, so that we feel the feelings of an edge, so that we can break orbit through the edges that create the sense of separation. We break orbit and we purify out of our really deeply held habitual protections. We break orbit, and once we break orbit into finer frequencies of intelligence and of our own consciousness, life starts to become more joyful and more beautiful as a reflection of the frequency that we're living at, because we're living more at the frequency of love, and we're kind of tidying up the frequencies of fear. Whereas in the earlier stages, we're living more in the frequency of fear and belief in separation. And life has to push us more to break through those fear frequencies and transmute them into love. And so this is what we mean by more purification happens, and then we almost like mature and graduate into more of a refinement process. Although it's not like climbing a ladder, it's not 1 step, 2 step, 3 step, 4 step, now you're at the top. It's much more gyroscopic than linear, right? So we're opening in awareness, we're opening to the gorgeousness and the beauty of the absolute, the transcendent field. This is almost like a vertical axis that we're opening to experiences of the transcendent true nature of the being, of the presence, of the glory, of the light. And simultaneously, life is, we could say, almost like stretching our heart strings, opening the heart. And as we purify and we bust out of the personal heart, we start to be able to receive more universal frequencies of the infinite heart. And then the sense of the heart center is like this, it's almost like an infinity, how we see an infinity sign in the infinite flow. It's like the sense of our heart is like the pivot point, and one side of that flow is the creation and appearance of life, and the other side of that infinite flow is the flow to infinity. So it's like a point, but the whole of life is flowing, 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 flowing. And as we refine our nervous system, when we can recognize the flow of life, we jump more into that flow. We recognize, oh, it's actually just so much more beautiful and graceful and easy to be in the flow of life and just flowing in the knowing of the heart that it's all grace, and life flows and life flows. And the more that we're in the knowing of the love frequency and the grace, we stop resisting life in the ways that we once did, right? Or we lessen our resistance, and our resistance gets lesser and lesser, and we're living more in the love frequency. So this is like we could say the horizontal axis, the horizontal plane of life, we could say, and the heart seeming like it's being stretched and purified and broken open and busted free, all of these ways. It can feel like heartbreak, but it's really heart opening. It's like life cracking us open, pushing us to the sense of the edges of personal heart protection, so that we break orbit, into the sense of the infinite heart. And we have this capacity to keep breaking orbit into finer and finer frequencies of the wide open field of consciousness. And we're opening to recognize the true nature, the self, the pure knowledge. And we're opening to this unified field, which is the field of heart, of self, the field of the Atman. And this unified field, it's like our lived experience goes through many refinement processes as we recognize this unified field. Our consciousness is our lived experience of the frequency of our consciousness is it's like we're opening more to the unified field, and we're refining our experience of the unified field. And what that feels like is we start to see the light in everything. We start to know the grace in everything, whether it's objects that we recognize clearly as objects, or whether it's the objects of experience, which are like the thoughts and the experiences, right? We start to recognize the light, the essence nature in everything. And so our lived experience starts to feel more unified, that our consciousness that is refining in its depth of unity, remembrance of unity, starts to be lived more on the surface of life. And so on the surface of life, our life feels more integrated and unified, and we start to feel more love and more love for everything. And we start to just realize that there's just not the same ways of dividing and protecting. And of course, at every point, how this unfolds, this blossoming, this flowering, is completely unique at the point, even though the consciousness is all one, right? And it's almost as if the heart is this pivot point, and our nervous system is this transmutative distillery where all of life can be transmuted and refined. And so our lived experience is a completely integrated experience. It is this precious alchemy happening in motion. It's the field of intelligence in motion. It's the Atman, the flowing field of the self, the one self, the universal self. This is where we have, in a way, we've surrendered our unique point. We're surrendering soul to the universal field. And yet soul will still feel unique, as in a unique set of laws of nature. You'll still have a unique expression, and that will be your soul light, right? Even though the soul is surrendering into the unified field. And then the great glory is that, of course, the refinement just continues and continues in subtler and subtler ways, because the Atman itself, we could say the self itself, is always the glory. The self is God. The self is the divine. But the self is knowing itself. It starts off knowing itself, we could say thinking itself as a person, and it surrenders that back into the pot, the big soup, the big wide open field, and it remembers itself as a field, as oneself, and then it's remembering itself in and as everything. It's remembering its unity with all that is. And of course, this is happening at the essence level. Consciousness is refining and refining. And we could say that Atman is always Brahman. Atman is always Brahman. But it's almost as if within the lived experience, Atman has to remember Brahman, has to remember its divinity, even though it always is divinity. And at a certain tipping point, we could say, of the sense of the unity of the field, the recognition of this, that consciousness feels its unity, that consciousness is releasing its sense of being divided, that the frequency of the unity is at such a fineness that fineness brings the natural remembrance of divinity. And in that, we could say the self then experiences itself as nothing, as it's experiencing itself as itself. It's experiencing itself as one, and as in the knowing of itself as one, it's not actually anymore experiencing itself consciously. So it feels like it is prior to consciousness, because its experience of itself is so direct. Only one, only one, only one. And to start with, that feels like it doesn't exist because it's only one. It feels like, oh, I don't exist. I'm not even here. There's nothing here, because it feels itself. It's so used to flowing and seeing itself in the tree and the table and the floor and the bugs and the birds and the light of the sun. It's so used to kind of experiencing itself not as objects. It's not as objects, but it's experiencing itself because it's gathering itself. That when it really starts to feel its oneness, it has flashes of feeling, whoa, where did I go? Where did I go? Right? And yet that sense of where did I go is a dissolving into God, into the one, and where there's no other, no second, nothing else. And it dances, it dances to open to itself in this way. And it's completely unique and beautiful at every point how this opens. So we speak of like this vertical axis and this seeming horizontal axis, but it's not two different axes of opening. It's this completely gyroscopic, like it's opening a bit here and a bit here and a bit here and a lot here and not so much here and a lot more here, and then a big opening here, and then this feels more open, but it's dancing in this totally wild, unabandoned, directionless, and yet all directional wildness that is life. That's the flows of intelligence, just dancing and dancing and dancing. And the dance is joyous, the dance is delightful, and it brings those reverberations of joy, of consciousness, just dancing and freely within itself and being nourished, blissfully nourished within itself. It starts to feel in the nervous system like more joy, more love, more happiness on the surface of life, right? Because those flows, those blissful flows of life and intelligence are completely joyful, completely exuberant, in the freedom, loving themselves, knowing themselves, unifying with themselves, remembering the frequencies of the fine frequencies of divinity. And then multidimensionally, multi-frequency, coming back at the point and opening through the heart, through the nervous system, as more light and more of a sense of love, loving presence. So this is what is happening in this precious alchemy that is life, that life itself is the precious alchemy, every single drop of life. And the more that we recognize this, the more open we are to receive it and to alchemize it. And the more that the alchemizing happens through the system, we can receive more fine frequencies of light and bring the light to the surface of life. And that's really our great service, is to bring the light to the surface of life and be a reverberation of light on the surface of life, loving, being a beacon of light and an embodiment of love, loving and bringing just more love to the surface of life, more of the love frequency. And in that, of course, the great service to the whole is just being an antenna wherever you are, whatever your life is being played out as, you're an antenna for that. It doesn't have to look like performing any particular dharmic role. It's just in the living of life, just being the presence of love and loving where you are, loving the ones that you meet, being the frequency of love for the ones that you meet and encounter, being a shining heart of light wherever you are, whoever you're with, wherever you are moving on the surface of life. And so how beautiful, how extraordinary is this life, this precious alchemy, how extraordinary it is. And the glory is in the, as we come to really recognize this precious alchemy, we in that recognition, we're reverberating more finely, right? So in the recognition within our system, and that recognition feels like the heart's knowing, we are in more of the intuitive knowing, and we're opening to everything that we've ever longed for. We're opening our intuition in the truest, purest, most natural way. We don't need to be really gathering techniques and having adventures in the astral, because we're opening to something so incredibly pure. We're opening to the field of divinity. We're opening to the remembrance of what God is, of what the glory is. We're opening to wholeness. We're opening to realize that the more that we drink the nectar of our own bliss and we transmute through our nervous system, and the more bliss that we create, the more we drink that bliss in, we're nourishing the gods, we're nourishing the divine, and we're bringing forward a surface of life experience of reality, that we're not needing to create experiences like hallucinogenic experiences on the surface of life, because we're opening to reality. And in a way, all seeming hallucinogenic experiences are that we enter voluntarily through whatever means on the surface of life. It's all because our heart is longing for reality. So why not just go to reality? Why not just be in reality and actually skip anything that dulls the nervous system and creates experiences that come and go? Why not just dive right into the glorious gyroscopic process of drinking bliss nectar and living in and as reality, right? How glorious. And we get to see how this is all we've ever been longing for. It's everything that we're longing for. And we're trying to find experiences of this on the surface of life. We're even trying to find it through, of course, relationships, sexuality. We're trying to find it in everything. We're trying to find it in food. We're trying to find it in everything, trying to create heightened experiences. We're trying to create an experience of the reality, which is living bliss. But ultimately, reality isn't an experience that comes and goes. Reality is the infinite, eternal, forever. It's the forever knowing of yourself. It's the surrender of all sense of individuality back into the remembrance of the universal field of light. And so as these words come, it's just to receive them as an attunement in the system. And the attunement of the system is your consciousness, which is the one consciousness. Your consciousness, we could say, at the point, receiving the attunement and simultaneously receiving the attunement in the field. And the attunement in the field brings nourishment to the point. And then there's a feeling of having kind of like an experience at the point, but it's not an experience that comes and goes. It's a deepening activation of intelligence at the point. It's an initiation at the point. And that once that activation has taken place, it doesn't go away again, right? It's not an experience that comes and goes. The experience that comes and goes is the surface of life experience, right? We don't have experiences that come and go in consciousness. It's always the same, and we drop deeper into that. but the surface of life experience comes and goes. And that's why to enter into this glorious landscape of consciousness where refinement is happening, we want to drop into the presence that drops us deeper into the stillness, into the silence of what we are as consciousness, so that we can really be present in the refinement. The surface of life experience comes and goes. It's always changing. That's why we can't trust it, right? We can't trust the surface of life experience because it's always changing. What we can trust is that which is not changing. What is not changing is awareness. It's your sixth sense. Awareness is the awareness of all that is moving and changing, and yet awareness itself never changes. Awareness can use sense perception, it can use listening, it can use vision, it can use all of the senses. Touch is that sense of feeling, touch, feeling, sensation, right? It uses the taste. Drink in the elixir, the soma, drink in the bliss, the fragrance of yourself, getting a great, glorious double nostril waft of yourself, right? Knocks you out, knocks you into the ecstatic wildness, right? That's what we're longing for. We're longing for the heightened experience, right? Make it the most heightened experience, right? And we try to bring things in through the senses that will give us that experience, whereas all that we really need is the most incredible whiff of true nature, the incredible deep taste of bliss in the back of your throat, a drop of nectarine bliss dropping from the glands, the illuminated glands, and the brain that's just brightness. As that nectar drops in the back of your throat and gets swallowed, it gets swallowed down into the digestive system, and it starts to nourish the digestive system on the most subtle and refined level of intelligence. And that intelligence isn't contained within your body. We could say that your digestive system isn't really contained within the body. It's a field of intelligence. And that field of intelligence, once it's nourished, starts to flow with these kind of more ecstatic and rapturous and euphoric flows of bliss. Ooh, joyful. And we start to see the light. Brighter, brighter, brighter. Everything in the appearance suddenly seems to be so bright, so vibrant, colors that you haven't seen before. Wow, right? And this is reality. This is reality. So in the listening sense, we start to be able to receive the deep sound of silence. So deep, so silent, so still, and yet roaring, almost like a loudness that is just unbelievable. So awareness uses the sense perception, right? The true vision, the true seeing is the seeing of the light, the seeing of the self. It's subtle perception. It's in the subtle body, in the light body. It's where awareness is aware of itself. It's seeing itself. And has a feeling of a vision, can even be moving the eyes as if you're looking at something, but it's not in appearance, it's a seeing. It's as if the vision grasping outwards to try to take in the landscape drops back into like an inner absorption of a seeing of yourself, a deep inner absorption in yourself. And so this is why awareness is like the sixth sense. It's intuition, right? It's the heart's knowing. And all of our longing to have a more refined intuition starts to come naturally online because we're listening deeply and we're seeing deeply, right? But we're seeing absorbed in the self, absorbed in the true nature, in the presence, in the silence. The one that sees the self is open to the whole wide open field, the field of the self, the Atman, this glorious, wide open, unified field that is the heart. That is the frequency of love. It's a unified field. And that wide open, unified field is what love is. It's the frequency of unification, we could say, of unity. It's the frequency of one is love. The frequency of one is love. And when we're resonating at the frequency of love, the nervous system starts making the bliss nectar. And that bliss nectar starts affecting our lived experience. The life feels more supported, more smooth, more joyful. And at the deepest level, as we nourish the intelligence then creates the appearance of a life from these deepest vibrations, right? So the whole intelligent process of what we are, we come to realize that we are the creator. We're nourishing creation through transmuting our lived experience in the nervous system. We're nourishing creation. We give creation back to the creator by transmuting it through our system out of a story of separation, and we give it back as bliss flows, as we transmute it back through our system through sensation. Sensation is the touch sense. As we transmute it through the system, we give creation back to creator. We give our false perception of separation, of division. We give our false perception back to the creator. We give the fear back to love. We transmute it through the system, the nervous system, through the consciousness. We give it back to creation. And what we give back is not like a basket of rubbish, of toxins. We've transmuted it through our system. And what we give is bliss. We offer bliss back to creation. And these creative flows of intelligence, they take in the bliss and they offer then back the highest, most profound possibility from the infinite field of possibilities for your life. They offer you back a flow of creation that will most support your freedom, your deepening, until those flows that flow back are just reality, are God, are the glory. And that's what you're seeing, right? So this is what is happening in this play of life. This is the precious alchemy of life. So as these words are coming, we are, in a way, this is like a very deep initiation and activation in the system, because whatever we are speaking is happening right now. So just opening to what you're noticing, what you're noticing. We're not speaking of a theoretical idea. We're speaking the here now direct experience of the intelligence of the field. And as you attune with the intelligence of the field, you're opening to exactly the process of intelligence that we're speaking of. You're opening to the refined flows of intelligence that you are. You're opening to receive and drink in the nectarine bliss. You're opening to receive that nectarine bliss in the lived experience. This is the glory, that every single moment of the lived experience has the possibility of taking in nectar and digesting it. And whether it feels like just an experience that just feels joyful and gorgeous, that's generating and flowing the joy of the experience, or whether it's an experience that feels like stress or resistance and we transmute it, ultimately the byproduct, the deepest nourishment that comes is the bliss. We transmute it, we distill it all through the system, and we're always receiving the bliss nectar. Unless, of course, we're resistant and we're stuck. And then on the surface of life, we're circling the frequency of fear. But at some point, awareness will come in and resistance will surrender. And the transmutation process will happen. So just noticing what you're noticing. Noticing what is happening. What is so precious is to come to such an intimacy with your experience. We can tend to have, in our habitual learned moving of the attention towards the mind and the life, we've become disconnected from the intimacy with our deep conscious experience of our nervous system and the intuitive heart and the flows of intelligence and the flows of creation. But we're really longing to be back in the wisdom light of this. So coming to an intimacy with what's happening in our system is such an incredible way of feeling the power of life, of the lived experience, instead of feeling disempowered and disconnected from life or a victim to life. We start realizing, wow, I'm creating all of this. Like, what am I digesting all of this life? Am I digesting this situation? Or am I in fear and am I in this, am I generating fear and are there toxins running around my system, right? We just start noticing, and none of it's wrong. It's all grace. All of it's grace. Even if we're in fear, it's all grace. But the more that we recognize that it's all grace, we have this ever deepening capacity for our system to refine, to receive more light, to flow in light, and to bring the light alchemy and transmutation to everything in the life that feels like there's a division or feels like a place that we're not free. So just noticing what is being noticed. What is being noticed? Just notice and just come to an intimacy with the system. Feel the inner functioning, the subtlety. When there's a feeling of discordance, we, as awareness, we are aware of the discordance. And then we use awareness uses the sense of touch to feel the feelings, feel the sensations. You touch. There's touch happening in your nervous system. You feel the sensations, feel the aliveness. Receiving the deep roar of the silence, the pulse, the vibration, the frequency. You see, we're using the listening sense. Receive the frequency. In a way, the frequency is also received through the sense of touch. Awareness uses more than one sense. It combines the senses. It's combining all of the senses. It doesn't divide the senses, right? When we move to the mind and sense perception, we use sense perception to divide my experience, my preferences. But awareness doesn't divide the senses. Awareness uses all of the senses simultaneously to give us a holistic, deep sensory, intimate experience. When we really open to that, we start to open to more of the ecstatic bliss flows of the experience, because anything that we are experiencing, we're experiencing multidimensionally and through awareness, multisensory. We're just opening to the aliveness, we could say. It's why it feels so alive. It's why we can move from agony to ecstasy in a millisecond. It's because it's awareness is using sense perception holistically, and we're receiving the moment without dividing it. And when we receive the moment without dividing it, it can be transmuted, because the undivided is the frequency of love that transmutes. So the undivided experience of sensation, aliveness, transmutation starts to happen. When you can be aware and you can be the aware, loving presence, you're shining the light upon whatever's arising, whether it's image or whether it's a feeling that feels discordant or hard, shining the light upon it, feeling the sensations, really receiving it, tasting it, taking it in, all of it on every level. It's undivided. You're not resisting anything. And then the system can alchemize it in its incredible, profound, intelligent way with light. The light touches it all, transmutes it all into light, the remembrance of light.